and being as careful as possible. This morning, we speak gender equality. We have seen that in the past, currently, advancing young women and girls' sexual and reproductive health rights is an area that needs to be focused on by different categories of people, be it the civil society, the governments, the youth, the feminist-led organizations, as one of the bold moves that will eventually lead to the realization of gender equality. Now, the Generation Equality Forum, which is our basis of this discussion, is unique in its strategy to achieve gender equality. Unlike many other initiatives that are short-term, Gender Equality Forum has a 5-year agenda. In this discussion, you'll mostly hear us talk about bodily autonomy, and later I'll be asking this question to get a better understanding of what it is. Sexual and reproductive health is one of the bold themes for this discussion, and of course later to make commitments towards having a better world that is genderly equal. Now, in our studios this morning, we do have a group of very experienced people, I want to put it that way. I'll start with Elizabeth Kemgisha, who is an advocacy officer at the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers. You will probably hear it, maybe FIDA, you've heard about it. You've had people really looking forward for their services. She is joining us on Zoom, and I do hope that, Elizabeth, you can hear us. We are delighted to have you on the panel this morning. A very good morning to you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you hear us? We also have Anna Kukundakwe. Fortunately, she is here with us in our studios. She is the Program Officer at the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And finally, the gentleman that you will mostly see in a group of ladies and women, Mr. Mondo Chateka, who is the Commissioner for Youth and Children Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Very pleased to meet you again.
Thank you, Sandra. Alone but not frightened. And I think, thank you for inviting us here to talk about a subject which is central and should be central to people's hearts.
Absolutely.
Because once we strike the issue of gender equality, then we are there flying.
Yes. Now, for you who's joining us wherever you are on our social media platforms or even live here on TV, do remember you can be part of this conversation by using the hashtag Generation Equality Forum, or UG, that is on Twitter, be it on Facebook as well. And you can also use the hashtag Generation Equality. Be part of this conversation by sharing with us your thoughts on our social media platforms. Let us discuss this issue together. Now, diving right away into it, I do hope that I can get Elizabeth, because I do want to set the pace of this discussion by understanding what Generation Equality Forum is all about. What I have seen and read about this is that it does work towards delivering tangible progress towards the achievement of sustainable development goals. You know, almost every single thing that we talk about is about the sustainable development goals. Now, Goal 5 itself works towards achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. We want to get the genesis of this, and hopefully when we get in touch with Elizabeth, she'll set that pace for us. But leaving that aside and starting with the people in our studios here who are closer to me, as we speak, as we talk, as we meet actually here today, how are we currently doing when it comes to gender equality in the country? I want to start with you, Anna.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and thank you for having us. When we start, I think, with Generation Equality Forum, and then we are talking about gender equality at the country level, I think it's worth noting that 25 years ago, Uganda committed to the Beijing Declaration. And in this declaration, governments and UN agencies, civil society organizations anonymously agreed that women's rights are human rights. And they also agreed that eradication of poverty and contributing to social development is going to be difficult and very impossible without the inclusion of women and recognition of women's contribution. So that is how we ended up having what is commonly known as the Beijing Declaration. Along the way, of course, you rightly put it on the development, the upcoming of the development goals, which is also known as Agenda 2030. Also, government realized that they needed to form a forum that would enhance progress, or they would expedite the process of realizing Agenda 2030, and that is how we have the Generational Equality Forum. So and then so that again, Uganda is of course a signatory to the Sustainable Development Goals. Then when we reach at the country level, we've had civil society organizations that have come together to form what we call a Generational Equality Forum, civil society organization. So then that is what has translated into this conversation that we're talking about here, which we want to, and this is where you're asking me, how are we progressing with gender equality? So I've started at a global level for us to understand that gender equality is not just out of the blue. It's a global issue, and it's not just happening in Uganda, but everywhere in the world. They recognize that women's rights are critical and an integral part of society and living. While Uganda has made great progress in terms of creating opportunities for women, empowering women through different programs, through the Ministry of Gender, enhancing women's health, enhancing women's rights, with, and this has been very great. Promoting girl child education. I am sure you must have been a beneficiary of the 1.5 at university as you were joining university, in terms of trying to enhance, to make sure that they create a platform for you to be able to compete favorably with the boys. So that put us in a place where we actually have had that astride, and that with many reports showing up, we've actually seen that there are more girls that actually enroll and complete secondary education. So Uganda has made progress. We have had laws and policies that we've made at the national level that we actually promote gender equality and enhance gender equality, but we certainly think that more can be done. And that's why we're having this conversation right here, that we believe that more can be done in eliminating cases of gender-based violence. More can be done in having progressive laws and policies, as we'll be discussing. We also know that more can be done for us to be resilient in times like these pandemics, where actually I saw Daily Monitor write an article say that in some districts they were worried they are not going to have female learners because they are scared that actually they are going to, many of them are going to get pregnant, they will disappear from the pandemic. So we are risking a whole generation right here. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because I believe it's going to have great recommendations and solutions.
Yes, and also greatly, we do have a gentleman from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. I want to right away go to you, just to, when you look at our topic today, bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights for adolescents and young women towards achieving gender equality, what comes to your mind when this topic, for instance, when we called you that we wanted to talk about this topic, what came to your mind? Yeah,
so before I go to that topic, I wanted to put the issue of gender equality into perspective.
Yes.
But also, I expected Anna to say that recently, the women of Uganda, you had in politics and in agriculture. In agriculture, we call it a bumper harvest. In politics, you can say you really got acceleration
topmost
in terms of positioning yourself to influence whatever takes place in the country.
Yes.
You had a vice president, you have a prime minister, all of them women. You have a first deputy prime minister. You have a third deputy prime minister. Then you have a host of ministers, all of them women, who are not judged on the basis of being women, but on terms of their competence and given an opportunity to serve the country. But also, oftentimes, for especially men, when we talk about gender equality, they think in terms of this government wants women to be equal to men. No, that's not the issue. The issue, what we understand, and I'm going to read that, gender equality is women and men's similarities and differences are recognized and equally valued. Men and women enjoy equal status, recognition, and consideration. Gender equality does not mean that women and men become the same, but that their opportunities to participate in and benefit from interventions are equal. To benefit in and participate in interventions are equal. You don't judge me because this is Mondo and this is Sandra and this is Anna. No, you are judging us as human beings. And that's where she started. That human rights, women's rights, are human rights. And the moment you get it right there, then it becomes easy for you Even when you're going to talk about bodily autonomy, which area I want to leave to Anna, and I'll be talking about interventions that the government has put in place. But the sister of gender equality is gender equity. And this is fairness. Gender equity is about fairness and justice in the distribution of resources, benefits, and responsibilities between men and women, girls and boys, in all spheres of life. And when I come back, I'll be talking about what are some of the things that government has put in place to ensure that. Sandra would prefer that issues of bodily autonomy, I leave them to Anna, because she has been at it for a long time, and I don't want to mess her up. But if you allow me, I will talk about a few things that government has been doing, not just starting yesterday, but the current government starting in 1980, 1986. You know, wherever the NRM was capturing power, they would establish what was called resistance councils. And at every resistance council, there had to be a secretary for women affairs.
Yes.
A secretary for women affairs to look particularly into the issues that impact and affect the women. Because the women had been left behind and lagged behind for quite a long time. Come 1993, government went ahead progressively to establish what we call now women councils. Women councils as some kind of a nursery bed of sorts to groom women into national appearance. The women forget all about thinking that they are meant for the kitchen, but that they can be in the boardrooms and discuss issues of national importance. Of course, issues of the kitchen prepare us for discussion because we have to eat, we have to feed, but over and above that, can they do more than that? So the National Youth Councils, the National Women Councils were established in 1993 by an act of parliament to be grooming gardens for the women to join politics. And I have seen quite a number of women who started by as women councillors becoming, big ministers, prime ministers, etc., etc. Progressively, we come to 1995, the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. The government looked at the Constitution with gender lenses. I'll pull out specifically Article 32 of the Constitution, which provides for affirmative action, knowing that where women culturally are disadvantaged. You know, in many societies, when men are talking, women are not supposed to speak. You are supposed to be there and say, yes, yes, sir, yes. I agree, in the total. Even when you don't understand what you're talking about.
You just have to keep agreeing.
You just have to keep appearances and agree. So we said, no, there should be a platform which will ensure that gender equality is enhanced.
Yes.
And the Constitution didn't stop at that. We went to Article 78 that now provided for women's presence in Parliament. Article 78 talks about the Constitution of Parliament. And so it provided that every district must produce a woman member of Parliament. That's how the numbers are improving. And we are seeing many women, at the national level and doing incredible jobs. Sometimes better than men in many aspects. I hope that men, when I get out of here, will not be stoning me. But these are the facts, and the facts are speaking for themselves.
Yes.
And you can see what is happening within the country. Of course, there have been issues that she has already talked about, issues of gender and equity budgeting, a type of resource allocation that includes analysis of public revenue and public expenditure from a gender and equity perspective. Gender and equity budgeting is under the Public Finance Management Act 2015.
Yeah.
And that now, if you come up with your budget and it's looked at with the lenses from the Equal Opportunities Commission and doesn't look like you gave due consideration to gender equity budgeting, you'll be thrown out. So your budget will not be considered. The budget has to stick to the principles of gender equity budgeting. Are you giving consideration to the women and men, the things that affect the women and men in your budget? Are you giving consideration to the different regions where Anna comes from, where Mondo comes from, where Sandra comes from? Because all these are parts of the country. And so if you don't measure that, your budget is likely to be thrown out. It will not be allowed by means of finance. And if you go to issues like she talked about the 1.5, I had even forgotten about it. But 1.5 was one of those things that was put in place and gave to enhance the participation of the younger women in the education system. Because if you have 0.5% of your population not going to school, there's a problem.
Yes.
Then comes in 1997 or thereafter, UPE, then followed by USE. Because hitherto, men would still take a choice, given an opportunity to choose between Sandra and Mondo, who should start school and who should start home. They would do most plausibly choose Mondo to continue his education and have Sandra prepared for marriage.
Thankfully, it's not the same now.
In some places, it is still there. But as a result of having free primary education, free USE, the numbers, they are near to equity, to parity. That we are having the equal numbers enrolled at P1 of girls and boys. And that gives us, some satisfaction. The issue will be that maybe people may raise later, completion rates. Completion rates.
People start and they stop at some point.
They stop at somewhere.
Yeah.
And during COVID, you and me know,
it has disrupted everything. Yes, absolutely. Now, thank you so much, Mr. Mondo, for giving us a perspective of what the government has been doing over the years to achieve gender equality. I do hope we can get Elizabeth Kemjisha, who is an advocacy officer at the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers, FIDA. You who's watching us, you could have heard about FIDA or used their services. A very good morning, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for joining us on Zoom.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you to the other panelists that are in studio today morning. I hope that you're able to
one of the key terms that we're seeing, we're using this morning is bodily autonomy. Someone that is watching us today, what does it exactly mean, especially for the young adolescents and women?
Thank you so much, Sandra, for bringing up that question. And I would like to thank Mr. Mondo and Ms. Sandra for at least highlighting some of the things the government has done and what is happening on the civil society scene in terms of reproductive health rights, especially for women and adolescent children. When we speak about bodily autonomy, and we are speaking about the freedom to choose, the ability to have access to these services that may help you make the decision on what you do with your body. If it is in the context of women and girls, choosing on whether to use a contraceptive or not, choosing how many children you want to have, choosing which men you want to have sex with and at what time you want to have sex with them, choosing or having the ability to access services on sexual health, reproductive health services so that they help you make a decision on what will work for you, what will work for your body, and what will work for your earning and all that. So it goes into one, having the right, so having in place policies in place that will allow for someone to make this decision. Two, having these services in place that allow for especially women and the adolescents access this information to help them make these decisions. So that's what it generally means.
And now
Sandra,
I do want to still throw this question to you. When you look at the current scene and the different things women and children go through at the moment, what are some of those challenges that they have towards bodily autonomy? Like you just mentioned it. If I'm to summarize it, would you allow me to say bodily autonomy simply means the right to choose what to use your body for? Can I put it that way? What are some of the limitations that we are seeing towards achieving bodily autonomy for each individual?
Okay, thank you very much, Sandra. First things first, yes, you can call it that, on what we do with our body, on how we use our bodies, in what spaces we occupy because of what our bodies look like or because of the nature of services that we are consuming. So yes, you can go ahead and call it that. one, some of the challenges that women are facing in regards to that is failure to access these services. We know that the context has changed with COVID-19, and I know that the government has done a lot of work in helping young women out there and young boys access some of this information. And some of the work that civil society like SEHAT, like FIDA, like Women Pro Bono Initiative, like Wudu are doing to ensure that women in their different diversities are able to access these services. We know very well that some of the women are not homogeneous, one. So because institutions like Nowudu exist, we see that we are able to reach out to, for example, adolescents, women and men with disabilities who may not on a regular be able to maybe access these services because of their physical disabilities or whatever other disabilities that they're struggling with. Two, we are having issues of maternity care. We know that SEHAT, for example, filed a case on maternity care and access to such services in this country that continue to be a problem. We know that past lockdown, the 3-4 months who were in the lockdown, you saw the overwhelming number of women that are still unable to access services when they are pregnant. We still know women still have to walk over 5-10 kilometers to access the first health center, access these services. So we think that's a very huge problem that women are still struggling with when it comes to that. But also overall, the other problem is really patriarchy and how it really finds itself into these spaces on who makes decisions on what Mr. Mondo spoke about earlier, about budgeting that takes into consideration some of these needs that affect women's sexual reproductive health rights. But also at the top of this discussion, I'd like for us to appreciate that it does not only just stop with your body. It means that if a woman is unable to make a decision on when to have children, at what time to have children, and how many kids to have, it means she cannot even make a decision on where to work. It means she's going to stay in the domestic sphere. Now, there's no problem with the domestic sphere, except that we know that many times when women are pushed into the domestic sphere, they are unable to participate in some of these economic activities that might help them get money into their pocket. So we know also the issue of young people, the comprehensive sexuality education that became an issue of concern under Mr. Mondo's ministry, on why a whole country fails to legislate or have in place a policy that allows for young people to access these services because of the several reasons. You saw it's immoral, we are getting kids to learn about sex way too early. But the truth of the matter is we have girls as young as 12 and 14 giving birth. So the earlier we face this and try to have policy in place and fund these programs that are in place so that we get from just the policies we have to action. So briefly, those are some of the issues.
All right, we did lose you over there, Elizabeth, but I do want now to throw it back to Anna Kukondakwe. Bodily autonomy, very well explained. We still have children or young girls or young adolescents that still struggle to make their own decisions because another person makes that decision for them. And you did mention while she was speaking that sometimes people are sexually active either by force or choice. Now, I want us to understand deeply, we are still operating sometimes in an African setting that, differentiates who a woman is, what they should do at what stage. Give us a bit of context on some of the present challenges that do hinder adolescents from achieving bodily autonomy.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Elizabeth, for shaping the conversation. I think if you're Ugandan enough, you're viewing the TV, you know that we have a challenge in this country when you talk about an adolescent, and in the next sentence or the next word is contraception. We know that that is a very huge challenge. This is not to mention that before COVID-19, Uganda was one of the countries with the highest teenage pregnancy rate in sub-Saharan Africa at 25%. That number, I'm very confident that it has been exacerbated by COVID-19. And we have had cases where in one district, a single district, they are reporting 10,000 cases of teenage pregnancies. So we have a challenge. Girls and women, especially adolescent girls, continue to face the challenge of inability to access services when they need them, and these include access to contraception and family planning. Some people have asked, why are adolescents family planning when they don't have families to plan for? But you know, let's use contraception as the middle ground. That challenge, even our own policymakers have challenges when it comes to these conversations. But this is to say that girls and boys are sexually active, and like I mentioned, either by choice or by force. Most of these cases are a result of human rights violations. They've either been raped, defiled. It's a case of incest. You know, it's a case of I am paying your school fees. I'm your father. Therefore, I must sleep with you. So those are the challenge. One challenge. And when that challenge, with those challenges, of course, incorporated into our religious, you know, African setting, then the issues of culture comes in, and people start telling you, oh, that is not African. You know, but are you saying girls getting pregnant and dropping out of school before they're of age is African? You know, is Africa supporting agenda being put down under the table and stepped down? You know, so that becomes another setting. And all those challenges I've mentioned in the culture and religious inform the kind of laws and policies that we have as a country. You, for example, know that there are laws in this country where they've even been passed, and the next morning they come out and say, we are recalling them because we think they are either don't support age appropriateness or they are not African enough. But I can tell you that a teenage pregnancy in Uganda is the same one in America. It's the same one. It's similar everywhere, you know. So the laws and policies that we have that are restrictive in nature, you know, pose a very huge challenge when it comes to lives of women and girls. You know, if you talk about policies that have been in draft for many years, I won't mention because even me, I feel some of them are nearly my age mates. And these are laws and policies, but the objective of formulating this is to help lives of young people. But they've been in draft form for many years. The National School Health Policy, I want to mention how many birthdays it has celebrated, you know. The fact that even as a country we don't have a law on termination of pregnancies, you know, the fact that even the regional and global commitments that we have made, for example, the Maputo Protocol, we still have a caption or a reservation. We have a caveat on Article 14(2) of the same reservation, and where we are saying, we cannot say that women actually have a right to terminate pregnancy. But we all know that some of these pregnancies, actually, women have not chosen to have these pregnancies, and others are even threatening the lives of the people carrying them, and who are the women. So all these challenges, of course, have an impact, and I'm happy we have
bodily autonomy. Before you even throw the question to Mr. Mondo, you just bring in an aspect of termination. It's one that so many people have talked about. In your opinion, when we talk about bodily autonomy, you would want to believe that as a government we should have a law that allows women, if they want to get rid of the baby, to actually terminate it.
Yeah. Because
it's their right. You say it's their right to choose what they use their body, at what point they give birth.
You see, women, bodily autonomy is the ability of the woman to choose what they need to do with their body. I want to get pregnant, I want to get married, I want to have 4 children, I want to have them with Mr. So-and-so, or I don't have to have children at all. So when we talk about issues of termination of pregnancy, or what you'd call...
It's a very sensitive matter.
It's a very sensitive matter, and it's a matter that has caused us. It's one of the reasons why our maternal mortality rates are skyrocketing. We've had very many women lose lives, you know, because they are unable to access safe abortion services. So if the argument is it's not African, but is it African for women to die because of a service they can actually access? It's not African. You know, the African has Africanism. My understanding is that it has the Ubuntu concept of us saying Sandra must be alive. But cases where we've actually seen that women die while trying to terminate these pregnancies, and for various reasons, you know, for Elizabeth has just mentioned about women living with disabilities, who everybody thinks, by the way, cannot have they don't have sexual and reproductive health and rights needs. When they get pregnant by choice, when they go to access a healthcare service or maybe antenatal, they will ask them, but you're disabled, how did you get pregnant? you know.
Yeah.
When the other cases of pregnancy are not by choice, they are raped, they are defiled, and because they even have a word in Uganda, they use mulema, you know. So if it cases of where a woman has been raped, a woman has been put in a young girl has been put in an unfortunate situation where she's been defiled by a relative, I certainly think that that woman should be allowed to make a choice, and this choice is whether they want to carry a pregnancy or not. And if the note is stronger, they should be able to access dignified services, safe services that won't take their lives.
The thoughts of Anna Kukondakwe. You too would like to hear from you. What do you think? What are your submissions? What are your thoughts on some of the things Elizabeth and Mr. Mondo and Anna have actually pointed out? Do be part of this conversation on our social media platforms and use the hashtag Generation Equality Forum UG or Generation Equality. We'll take a short break, but this conversation will come back shortly, so do not go away.
The day the world stopped was the day we found where to go.
And we are having a great group of speakers. Elizabeth Kimjisha, who is an advocacy officer at FIDA. She's joining us on Zoom. We also have Anna Kukondakwe, who's the program officer at the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, and the only gentleman on the panel, who, by the way, is very vocal about issues to do with young people and also women, Mr. Mondo Chateka, who is the Commissioner for Youth, Children Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development. Now, before we went in for a break, Anne had a submission when it got to bodily autonomy. We needed to understand that because it's one of the key terms in this discussion. And I want to throw back what she said about when it gets to the right to do anything you want to do with your body. If it is a pregnancy, for instance, do you have the right to terminate it because you're not ready to have it, or the way you got it was not proper? What are your thoughts, and putting all that within the general bigger picture of gender equality?
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Anna, and thank you, colleague on Zoom. The issue is that under the Constitution, there is space for abortion happening.
Yeah.
And this happens when a physician has said that this pregnancy may cause you losing life as the bearer of the child.
Yeah.
So there's that option. There are these other circumstances where it is out of incest, where it is out of rape. I think those are issues that we can continue debating and say somebody should have a right to terminate that pregnancy because that person didn't get it willingly. It was forced onto that person. And so even in our cultures, you feel, how are you going to call this child if that child was produced with the father? You have heard about rape cases. The other day police was talking about 240 cases in a month and finding out that it's the father actually who made the daughter pregnant. I think under those circumstances, humanly, I think we can continue debating this, but I think it should be allowed that somebody should be able to terminate that pregnancy on humanitarian understanding. I'm not saying this is the position of government. I'm saying it is something that we can debate on. But also I'm saying that where the pregnancy can cause trouble to the mother, there is leverage that the physician will say this take place. On bodily autonomy, I think, colleagues, we have to put this into perspective. And this must be age appropriate. You are not going to talk to my acting last born of 10, Price Chirawo, and say she has the freedom to do everything with her body, especially when that also contravenes the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which talks about the age of consent. She's not yet at the age of consent. She needs guidance. And so as long as the father, the mother, and the guardians are there, this child should be protected. Because we also know that when she gets pregnant at that age of 10, the possibility that she will die during pregnancy or during the time when she's giving birth are so high. And every woman here knows that there must be an age where the pelvis girdles, where the back can really carry the child. And so if you say you are part of the people killing the children, because we know most of the girls who die as a result of pregnancy, they are those who conceived while they were young. So everything should have a limitation. Let's not just put a blanket. Now, like, she's called Elizabeth points out about this thing that was Mondo's ministry. No, I don't have a ministry. It's our ministry. It's the Ministry for Gender, Labor and Social Development. And what we disagreed with was the word comprehensive. Comprehensive sexuality education. What's wrong with you saying sexuality education? And if you know very well, we went ahead to come up with a sexuality education framework for the in-school. Ministry of Gender is right now working on sexuality education framework for the out of school. Ministry of Education did for the in-school, we are doing for the out of school.
Yeah.
But without the word comprehensive. And we asked everybody there, including civil society, can you unpack for us the word comprehensive? What are you hiding under comprehensiveness? What's that you are not mentioning? Because government is okay with sexuality education. And actually, sexuality education has been part of us. In Uganda here, where none of you come from, and that's where I'm married. I'm married from Uganda. The girls access their aunties. They take them through a number of things, understanding their body growth, understanding changes in their, etc., etc., including the anatomy of their bodies, not autonomy. I'm now talking about anatomy of their bodies. Yeah. And so this has been going on. It's not a new thing. The uncles are supposed to talk to the boys about when they grow up how to become a man. That's coaching boys into men. And so this is acceptable. But when you start adding in some foreign things we don't really understand, we ask you, please unpack. You don't unpack. What do you want us to do?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mondo. Now, we just taking you back to Generation Forum Equality. We know that it has a 5-year global focus agenda, and it's not just a 3-day event. And we want to dive into what specifically it looks like in the promotion, one of the realization of bodily autonomy and sexual reproductive health risks and rights.
So the Generation Equality Forum, I think viewers can reach out, can look out for it online, and it's going to be happening tomorrow, starting tomorrow, 30th to 2nd of July. Is an opportunity for countries, for governments, including my own government, and for civil society organizations and for other players to resound our commitment. I honestly think that this is an opportunity for us to repack our commitment and see our focus, what this is going to be, how the lives of women and girls are going to look like in the next 5 years. We have an unprecedented time at hand, and that is the pandemic. And we all know that the pandemic has taken a disproportionate toll on women and girls. I can tell you for sure, I'm in where I stay, I'm seeing women who don't leave the estate anymore. They stay wherever they are because they have to support children with home learnings, homeschooling, which everybody never thought would be an opportunity. When we were thinking of, when Commissioner is talking about the comprehensive the sexuality education framework for the in-school, for the Ministry of Education that they developed, now the young people at home, are the parents empowered to actually speak to them about these issues? But so I feel like the Generation Equality Forum, it's just not a 3-day event, but it gives us an opportunity to resound our commitment in promoting women's rights, in recognizing women's contribution to social and economic development, in actually recognizing the work that they do at home, which many times or all the times is unpaid, and that is domestic work. It gives us an opportunity for us to know that to promote women's health, specifically women's sexual and reproductive health and rights, because this has an impact on how a woman, for example, is going to excel or to be economically empowered, to be everything. But giving it a critical priority in this forum is going to mean a lot for the lives and for the lives of women and girls across the globe.
And now that brings me to we would like you to briefly give us a like a few of the bigger, bolder commitments to achieve gender equality within the 5 years of the Gender Equality Forum?
I think from the civil society angle, where I stand, I think as civil society organizations, we committed to work with government in ensuring that we establish progressive laws and policies that promote gender equality. We are more than happy to generate a body of evidence, to conduct researches, to do capacity building, to do the unpacking that Commissioner is talking about. All this which is going to inform the progressive laws and policies that government needs to undertake. And more than ever, we committed and very open to new approaches and innovations that have emerged, but also the pandemic has showed us that these are critical. An element of self-care, you know, that gives back an individual the power, the autonomy to be in charge of their health without necessarily depending on a healthcare provider. We've seen that it's very critical in this time. So we are going to, we have a commitment to support government in institutionalizing self-care, for example, into our national programming. You know, right now everybody, you know, I'm seeing on internet, people are steaming with herbs and everything. They are doing all they can to take charge of their lives, you know. But there is an element that is silent. A woman that wants to access a contraception right now, you know, I don't know how they are going to access it. And they don't probably have a car. Even when they don't have a privilege of a car, even when they have it, they don't have a sticker. They cannot move, you know. So one of the key things that we're going to we envision or commit to doing is actually ensuring that we empower women. So innovations like self-care, government, embracing some of these innovations in the contraception realm, like the vaginal deep-provisional ring that protects a woman from contracting HIV, self-injector plan that protects a woman from getting pregnant, and all this can be administered by a woman herself. So that is a commitment that we are boldly making. And then the other commitment that we're making, I think, again, as civil society organizations, is for us to, we believe that promoting gender equality is not a mandate of government alone, but it is a mandate of everybody, private sector, civil society, religious leaders, culture. But we commit to bringing all those together into a harmonious conversation and making them appreciate the fact that women's rights are human rights, and also you know, making them appreciate that pandemic or no pandemic, we actually owe to the women and girls of this country and elsewhere in the globe a violent-free and equal society for them to live in. Thank you.
All right, now moving back to Elizabeth, who's joining us, who's been joining us on Zoom. We know that the UN Women creates a leverage from partnerships with the civil society, the youth, the feminist-led organizations to, of course, advance investments, policies, and programs that will meet the needs and equality benefit and are inclusive of young people and people for the progressive realization of gender equality. Would like you to briefly tell us more about that, Elizabeth.
Sorry, Sandra, please repeat your question.
We know that UN Women creates leverage from partnerships with the civil society and the youth and feminist-led organizations to advance investments, policies, and different programs, of course, working towards achieving gender equality. We do want to understand from your own perspective how all this works, basically to get more information on that.
Thank you, Sandra. Before I answer your question, I'll just use 1 minute to respond to Commissioner Mondo. That something comprehensive, it's something that is inclusive, it's something that is extensive, something that is broad. In the context of this conversation, for example, an extensive policy on bodily autonomy would look at, for example, the rights of adolescent girls. It will look at the rights of women and girls living with HIV. It will look at the rights of young boys, of children that are in and out of school. I just wanted to point that out so that there's a bit of clarity on what I meant. So to answer your question, Sandra, yes, the UN Women has been working with a lot of civil society, and one of the spaces within which we've been able to do work with the UN Women is through engagements like these. As it was mentioned earlier that the Generation, for example, Generation Equality Forum has been convened by the UN Women in collaboration with other partners, and the UN Women has been doing consultations with constituents like ourselves at FIDA, like Reach a Hand Uganda, like Women with a Mission, the co-conveners of this talk show, to reach out and say, what do you think is not working? What do you think we should include? How do you think you can support the government in coming up with policies that you think can work for the subjects or the constituents that you work with? Two, UN has also been supporting a lot of civil society on issues of sexual harassment in the place of work. I know that when we speak about bodily autonomy, it extends to that. When we reduce its meaning to just whom women have sex with, when to have children, but it also means when women do not want to have relationships, when women are able to say no, when women are able to say, I do not want that nature of relationship. So it extends to work on sexual harassment, and UN Women has been at the forefront of supporting work on sexual harassment in the place of work, sexual harassment, especially in the informal sector, as a critical sector that has been affected by sexual harassment but has not been broadly discussed. It has also been supporting work on violence against women, which is the end result of things like lack of bodily autonomy for women and young boys. So this work has been extended to many areas, especially areas for FIDA, for example, areas like the Karamoja region, Napak, Kabong, Otido, supporting sexual reproductive health response for women and ensuring that women are able to access SGBP services in a timely manner and in a manner that will save their lives, so that it's not, all intervention is not in vain. So it is true that UN Women has been leveraging on some of the spaces that civil society is occupying to invest in us to do this work. So while the UN Women may not be able to reach Kagadi where Sehad can reach, or Mbali where Women with a Mission will reach a hand, which reaches many youth that UN Women is unable to reach, they've been funding some of the work that we've been doing as this loose consortium as individual institutions, but also as different consortiums that UN Women has been part of. But particularly for this conversation, we would like to really appreciate UN Women for convening us, for looping us into this conversation. I know that a lot of viewers may not have ever heard about the Generation Equality Forum, and there's not been a lot of talk about it, but it's extremely important space, and we are glad that the UN Women has been able to accept our position paper from the loose coalition that you may have seen on this flyer that has convened this talk show, but also on ensuring that we are part of that step-by-step discussion to be happening in Paris. To Mr. Mondo and our other policy advisors and developers and the different line ministries, like my colleague from SEHAD just mentioned, we hope that this is a space for us to recommit to some of these things that we committed to do under the Beijing platform of action. If we say something about bodily autonomy, how would you like for society to support you? How would you like UN Women as partners to support the work, to fast track these processes, to consult with the different people that claim to do this work? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Over to you, Mr. Mondo. Post-Gender Equality Forum, we know from what she said the implications for the decision makers, be it the government, to do. We want to hear from you. What is the government currently doing to ensure that it prioritizes the needs, the sexual rights, the policies, the interventions for the adolescent young women and girls?
Let me start this way, that as government, we are committed. We have total commitment to do everything that is right within the policy and legal framework. On that one, we have total commitment. For where some people want us to do is not in conformity with the laws, the policies of Uganda, we shall re-examine and be able to say, this is unconstitutional. But also, as government, we are striving to make everybody know that gender equality is not a struggle for women, by women, or by women for women. It is a struggle that benefits all of us, and where everybody, man, woman, boy, girl, must of necessity participate. Because at the end of the day, the gains when we reach the equity levels, the parity levels, they benefit all of us. I don't think there is such a man who wants to be in the home and is the one who buys food every day. I think if there is the gender equality, there is equity in resource allocation, we earn the same pay, I would like to see Sandra buy the food today, I buy tomorrow, something like that. And so we all benefit from it. But asking me, if you ask me the question you asked Anna, I'll answer this way, that there are about 6 things that I feel are critical in this battle, taking it forward and ending it. One of them is for us to continue with gender and equity planning and budgeting. Ensuring that money goes where it benefits both gender.
Yes.
Both the women and the men, both girls and boys. That too, we enhance programs to do with education and awareness creation. Our people don't know. And it's worse to find some people who don't know that they don't know, who will continue not to take their girl child to school, despite the so many examples they see, including the ladies they are watching now in this studio. If you 2 ladies didn't go to school, what would you be doing with me discussing what? In what language? 3, economic empowerment.
Yes.
There is nothing that empowers a woman than education and economic empowerment. And so that's why government is putting money in UWEP, Uganda Women Enterprise Program, in YLP, Youth Livelihood Program, and a number of other interventions to empower the people of Uganda. If we have an empowered woman, we have a real woman who can manage to resist some of the vagaries that go on in our societies. We shall, as government, continue with putting in place strong policies and laws that, guide the people on what to do and what not to do. And to review those that we feel are failing us. Then finally, we shall continue to promote role modeling, coaching, and mentoring. I think there's a weakness in here. We don't find many women in this country, many girls in this country mentoring the others. We need those programs of mentoring. But finally, strengthening the role of parents, parenting. As a ministry, we did come up with the parenting guidelines, but we feel there is more that we need to do than just the parenting guidelines. Because people are still not parenting. And at the end of the day, they get out and they blame it on the children. The child has got pregnant, but this child, who talked to her about the vagaries of pregnancy in the first place? They were just playing hide and seek, and something happens. And so now we start on the debate of whether they should abort or not abort.
Yes.
And these are issues, these are fundamental issues that can be addressed within our families. Can we make our families the best key unit that provides early training, coaching, and guidance? Can we go back and see parents being parents again? And can we see people producing only the children they can afford to look after? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I do not think I will have to come back to you for any last remarks. That last comment is very important. Produce the children they can afford to look after. Now, Anna Kukondakwe, as we come to the end of this conversation, what is that one thing that you feel all the people watching us today or the different stakeholders should have at the back of their minds as we continue to look at what the forum is working towards achieving?
Thank you so much.
In a minute.
I think one is just an call to action that I'm going to part with, and also to confirm that a good law is a progressive law. Most of the laws that we have with our constitution, they're outdated. These were colonial laws. Definitely a lot has changed. New evidence has emerged. It is very important that we sit, revise, review, and align them to the same to align them to the context that we are living in. Lastly, cases of gender-based violence with the pandemic and the lockdown, I'm sure there is no story that goes out today without cases of bamute, bamtemude, baranye, you know those things.
Yes.
So my call to action is actually ensuring that we unclog the justice system. Can the courts be allowed to work in this in this lockdown, where they actually be able to attend to some of these cases? Mr. Mondo Chateka, I think it's a time now that we start having a conversation on having a national shelter for survivors of gender-based violence. You know, for many of these are even home. What you call home is not home because it's not safe. We have had cases where we have to evacuate people from their own homes to start running around to look for shelters where we can put them, which are very unregulated. So we think that it's an obligation of government to establish a national shelter to harbor and act as a safe space for gender-based survivors.
Our commitment is total.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna Kukundakwe, the Program Officer at the Center for Health, Human Rights and Development, for joining us this morning to speak about this very important topic. And finally, to you, Elizabeth, any last closing remarks as we come to the end of our conversation this morning?
Yes. Thank you very much, Sandra and the other speakers. I want to reiterate my colleague's call to action: shelters, shelters, shelters. They're a necessity, and we can no longer continue to work the way we are working. Two, that government continues or starts to recommit and actually put the money where the mouth is. Let us fund work, let us fund budgets that are going to help bring about gender equality. Three, in real context of our conversation today on bodily autonomy, we are hoping for Uganda where women have the power to say yes and the right to say no. And let our work be centered around that, for them to have the right to say no and then the power to say yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth Kimjisha, who is the Advocacy Officer at the Uganda Association of Women Lawyers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's getting to noon time. We appreciate you creating the time to talk about gender equality. For you who's been watching us, I want to believe that you have a better understanding of what bodily autonomy is, the right to say yes and no to decisions that do affect you, either physically, emotionally, or whatever way you want to put it, and also sexual and reproductive health risks, and why it is important for us as a government, for the civil society to actually talk about it, for different stakeholders to come together to address the issues affecting women, young children, and of course, in the end, if this is not worked on, it does affect the development of a country. I've been your moderator, Sandra Twino Video.